All of us.
All of us are guilty.
All of us are guilty.
All of us.
All of us.
All of us.
All of us are
All
lost.
of us are lost. Lost.
Lost.
Hello and welcome back to All of Us Are Lost, a podcast rewatch 20 years later, delving into the mysteries of that island from the TV show Lost. My name is Kat, and joining me on this expedition into the kind of known is Andy. How are you, Andy?
I'm good, Kat. How's yourself?
Yeah, not bad. Obviously, I think last time we spoke, the episodes, we were like, is this where the mid-season break is? And we were going to do some homework, and it was a mid-season break. And then accidentally, at the same time as doing that homework, we had a mid-season break. So we are back after a little time away. And what are our episodes this week?
So this week it's episodes 12 and 13, whatever the case may be, and Hearts and Minds. Whatever the case may be is, I think I'll maybe be kind and say it's a filler episode in the middle, discussing literally what is inside a case pretty much for the whole of a 40-minute stretch. And Hearts and Minds is looking into the past of mostly Boone, with Shannon there as well. It is a Boone-heavy episode, but it's the kind of the brother and sister dynamic that the two of them have got going.
Yeah, I think you're right with whatever the case may be. So this, as you know, as you said, this was the first episode back after a mid-season break, and we ended with, Claire's been taken. Locke and Boone have found a mysterious hatch in the middle of the jungle. It was all ramping up, and then this episode opens with Sawyer walking around the jungle and sort of being what, and then there's Kate, and then they find a waterfall and they go and have a nice little swim, and then they find a suitcase which Kate recognizes and she wants into that suitcase. It just feels very anticlimactic. And I mean, I think was it Sawyer's like talking to Kate about how she shouldn't be out on her own after what happened to Claire, but that's all that they've said. I kind of feel that, to me, if somebody, I know none of them were necessarily bonded because they've only known each other for a couple of weeks, but if somebody had infiltrated my little camp and had stolen a pregnant lady, I'd probably leave it more than a couple of days before I kind of return to normal, which I think is what really struck me, because you want to know what's happened, and then you get back. This would have been like a 2-3 week break when it was originally on, and it's like they've forgotten about it almost, which is, apart from obviously Charlie, but it just felt a bit weird.
Yeah, it feels like they've kind of pumped the brakes a bit, almost in anticipation of what might be coming later on in the series. They've this is essentially a development of the relationship between Kate and Sawyer slightly. There's been a bit of a softening in Sawyer in the previous episode where we discussed him and Saeed having the conversation and how maybe he's grown as a person. But then he's kind of went back a bit again and teasing Kate. So they go for a swim. Their swimming technique is really strange. So Sawyer takes his t-shirt off but keeps his jeans on, which those jeans are going to weigh you down. And Kate takes her trousers off but keeps her top on. And it's just very, you're going swimming. I know it's a TV show again. This is just delving into something that's not really there. But yeah, it very much does pump the brakes on it. It opens as if there's maybe a bit of suspense happening, like Kate hears something in the trees, but it is just Sawyer spying on her. And I would imagine, looking at the IMDb, this is actually the lowest rated episode we've done so far. 7.8, so it's still not terrible. And it isn't a bad episode. Like, it is, and there's interesting things going on. There's again a bit of a strain in Jack and Kate's relationship as well. While she's also bonding with Sawyer, so they've got those kind of two opposites really with that. But yeah, a definite filler episode, which is a strange choice considering the break, I think.
Yeah, it's another Jack Bender episode as well. I think I sort of did some tallying up. This is his 4th episode
Okay.
up to this point, which means that's kind of like a quarter of the episodes have been directed by him. And he seems to, well, he did Kate's first one, Tabula Rasa, and he did Walkabout and The Moth, which are all kind of far better, more interesting, character heavy ones. But this one just kind of feels a bit throwaway. We're back with Kate after having been back with Jack at the end of the last that sort of mid-series. But her story just, I don't know, even that isn't particularly interesting. So she
No.
is in a bank and she's pretending to be a woman called Maggie, and then there's a bank robbery, and then through the episode it's revealed that she's in on the bank robbery, but she's actually not robbing the bank. She wants to access a safety deposit box to get an item, and that's kind of her sort of determination and sort of like callous nature to get this one thing is then mirrored in the episode itself as she's trying to like trick it out of Sawyer, and then she's trying to sort of like coerce Jack into helping her like get this briefcase. But it still doesn't really tell us anything really about Kate. I kind of feel it was supposed to be more like, oh my god, she's part of the robbery, but I think even the first watch I wasn't necessarily surprised
Yeah.
by that reveal.
Yeah. It's the flashback especially I find a bit hollow. Like, every clip to her, apart from the reveal, as you said, and then the sort of final twist, if you even want to call that, where she turns on the robbers who she's a part of, shoots them, doesn't kill them, shoots them in the leg to get what is inside this safety deposit box. But it just kind of clips between the hold up, and that's kind of it. Like, when I've been taking notes on episodes, the flashbacks have taken up such a big proportion of it, the amount of detail they go in. Like, all the best cowboys have daddy issues with Jack, and the amount of detail that went in, and the amount it told you about his past and his relationship with his dad. There's notes and notes. This one I have 3 lines which just said, Kate's in a robbery, Kate's part of the robbery, Kate steals a box. And that's kind of it. Like, it's very strange, and especially for you wanting to get everyone back in, and I'm sure that people would have still been invested in it. But it's definitely the most filler episode we've had so far. And even the reveal, we'll kind of touch on this as well, the reveal at the end where she's kind of coercing Jack into helping her open the box. She tries to hide the key from him, which is on the marshal, his dead body. And Jack, once they get the box open, there's guns and things, but she's got an envelope with an airplane in it. And she says it belonged to the man I killed. And there's no answer to that. That feels like it's another thing that's just been added. That it's the first time I think a mystery has felt needless in this series for me so far. Interesting dynamic maybe in the way that Jack and Kate are. Like, Jack is very, I don't know, would you describe him as toxic in this episode? He is very aggressive potentially towards her, and he's distrust, sorry.
I don't know if he's necessarily toxic, but I kind of think that this is the point where I think he's been burnt so many times by Kate's games. Sawyer plays games where he's open and upfront about it, but Kate has kept so much. Obviously, Jack found out almost immediately about the fact that she was the one that was with the marshal on the plane, and he gave her all those opportunities to tell the truth, and she always sidestepped it and she lied. And I think he's just kind of come to terms with that is who she is, and I think he's just kind of a bit over it. And he knows that, okay, she's saying the guns, but there's got to be something else. And that I think the whole test with the thing with the key is a test. and then she
Mhm.
failed it, and I think he's kind of maybe his pride and his ego is kind of hurt a bit that she would consistently lie to him, because he's not gone around telling people that, oh yeah, she was with the marshal, or he's keeping this big secret for her,
Yeah.
and she still doesn't trust him. I think it's kind
Mm.
of more that, like, what else can he do to get
True,
her
yeah.
to trust him?
Mhm. Yeah, and yeah, she just kind of spits in his face with that. But it's pretty much, yeah, that is the gist of the episode. We spend 40 minutes wondering what's in the case, and then we find out what's in the case. I mean, there's 2 more dead bodies at the bottom of the lake, which I can't imagine would have been very healthy for them swimming in, because they're going to be swallowing some sort of lake water in that, with decomposition just kind of floating through. There's a lot of bad bacteria in there. I don't know if that would get added on.
Yeah, I was wondering about the decomposition, because I think we're about 3 weeks onto the island now. I can't say they've like
Mm,
studied decomposition in water, but I don't necessarily. The couple to me look like they've been there for a while, like longer than the 3 weeks. But as I say, I'm no forensics expert. I mean, I did used to live with one at uni, but we didn't go through that. We went through how to best dispose of a dead body, and like
mm,
where to place it to avoid detection for the longest. But we didn't go into the stages of decomposition, so
yeah,
not in
we
water
can
anyway.
talk about that after recording. So I've
Yeah.
got a couple of questions. um, Aside from that, I think really the only other developments is Side and Shannon becoming friendlier, because Side needs Shannon to translate Russo's maps and
Mm.
what she seems to think is its ramblings. Um, and initially, she's kind of reticent to do that because she's had an argument with Boone about her being pretty much worthless, and I think she's then holding back a bit because she doesn't want to expose herself as being any use, which is very strange. And then Rose just absolutely not taking Charlie moping, is the other thing, and praying together. I think she wants them to do. She's convinced that her husband who was in the tail of the plane. She's convinced that he's still alive, which Charlie seems affronted by almost. Those are the only other real character bits we get in this, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think we forget about Rose. I mean, she was on all of like the promo images and stuff, but
Mm,
barring sort of that conversation that Jack had, she's kind of not really been around. So it's kind of like nice to remember that she exists. So it's nice to see her. There
mm,
is sort of a new semi mystery on the island, I guess, where the tide is rising and it's
mhm.
like pushing them, so they all relocate to further in, and there's a little conversation between like Saeed and Jack where they're discussing the tides, and the tides shouldn't be doing this, isn't how water works, and they're like, oh, it's just another one of the mysteries of this island. So it's kind of
Yeah.
nice to see that everybody is acknowledging now that this is a strange island. So that
Mhm.
it does kind of give us a little bit of a semi like, oh, now look what the island's doing, it makes the water come up really fast. But but whilst they are doing that movement, with the case, there is this quite entertaining scene where, Sawyer's trying to pick the lock, and like
Mm,
Michael and
aye.
Hurley both walk past and sort of start making fun of him because, this suitcase that he has is apparently sort of like impenetrable, which is just kind of like, why does everybody know about this type of suitcase? Because it's like, oh, he's trying to break into a Talon. It's like, I don't get it. Why does
Yeah.
everybody know about this suitcase?
It's, yeah, it's a Halliburton. Is that what they
Something
call
like
it?
that, yeah.
They're trying to break into a Halliburton, which Michael, I could maybe understand, but then Hurley just immediately understands what a Halliburton is and just starts, pissing himself laughing. Halliburton, I think, is an American weapons manufacturer, maybe. So maybe it's something to do with that. Maybe they are well known for that. I don't know if they're a weapons manufacturer. Plus, on the side, they make suitcases, so they're not completely 100% evil. It's very strange. It was a nice note just seeing Hurley in that moment as well. Anytime he turns up, he's fantastic. Love seeing him on screen.
But yeah, that's kind of the gist of it. Charlie's the only one that seems to be missing Claire, and there is that nice little bit where after Michael and Hurley have made fun of Sawyer, and they say you need something strong like the axe, and then it cuts to Boone's stolen the axe and he's taken it into the woods for John Locke, and they're obviously like back at the hatch, and obviously there's a discussion about how people are kind of starting to wonder a little bit about us, which then obviously brings in the conversation with Shannon, because Shannon's like, Shannon asked if Boone's Locke's new boyfriend,
Yeah.
which I think is it shows Lost's age.
Yeah.
Like comments like that could be made. But yeah, and then obviously there's the big, I guess the biggest reveal is that Russo has been writing the lyrics to a song from Finding Nemo on that map. That's
Yeah.
kind of where the episode ends, isn't it? Shannon kind of like wanders over and is like, "Oh, is this fish film?" Which I then find interesting now that obviously Fox then got bought up by Disney and now Lost is available on Disney Plus, but they obviously didn't have the rights at the time to mention Finding Nemo. So Shannon just keeps referring to it as, "Oh, that fish film, the cartoon one."
Yeah.
I thought it was
We get it in the
quite interesting
remake.
looking back. Yeah.
Yeah. It's again, it's not a bad episode. It's just very very throwaway, I think,
Yeah.
for what it is, and for, I think it would have been, I don't know if at the time, if watching it, if you'd been waiting, say, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, would it have been disappointing? Would you have that mindset, or would you just be, oh, thank God, Lost back? But on a bit of hindsight, I think it's definitely not the strongest that they could have came back with, because it feels like it could have been dropped in anywhere, literally, apart from maybe the Shannon inside thing, which I think maybe the last shot, possibly Boone is just staring at Shannon inside, very suspiciously, angrily.
Yeah, it ends with like Sawyer, Saeed and Shannon having like a nice, from afar what looks like a nice sort of like intimate moment, and then you cut to like brooding Boone staring. But yeah, my mum would have definitely have gone, "We've waited for that." I'm pretty sure that is my recollection of watching that. "Oh, this time, what happened to Claire?" So yeah, I think she would have definitely, she was definitely disappointed. But I think, yeah, I think kind of like leading into, I guess, onto Hearts and Minds. I think Hearts and Minds has got a bit more to it, but again, it, whether it's the choice of characters to focus on in terms of it being Boone and Shannon, who kind of haven't really, I mean, Boone's tried to do a lot, but as we've discussed several times, he's done it all terribly, completely ineptly. And Shannon has just been completely apathetic to helping out at all. So I'm not necessarily sure if it's probably the choice of characters that make this one feel a bit fillery too. I don't know, what are your thoughts?
Definitely. I mean, I think it kicks off almost, maybe not exactly, but with a similar shot from the end of the previous episode, where Boone is staring at Shannon inside, bonding. I think Side's bringing Shannon some shoes, and he mentions how it's another mystery of the island, the fact that her feet have swollen up half a size. And yeah, it leads into two characters who Boone has been trying to get involved. Shannon's been very much in the periphery. Excuse me, sorry. And I think this is more, it feels like it's with how it develops, it's an episode that maybe needs to happen more for not what happens with Boone, but what Locke does. So you're seeing some of his motives and some of his quite extreme measures to integrate people into island life, almost, or what he believes as part of this island's life. The kind of main gist for Boone is he's wanting to tell Shannon what's happening. He's wanting to tell they're not hunting boar. I think getting pulled up by Hurley has maybe put a bit of the frighteners up him, because he says we've not had pork in like a week, which doesn't, I mean, I don't eat pork that much, but Hurley just does not seem too happy about it, having to deal with fish. And I think the main Boone and Shannon centric aspects of it aren't the best, but I do feel that this episode is better in other character development, like Locke. You have nice moments with Hurley and Jin, nice moments with Kate and Sun as well, that bring those characters forward a bit more than the sort of main focus. And again, this is a very, in terms of flashbacks, of a bit more notes than the last one, but it is pretty much self-explanatory in terms of Shannon calls for help from Sydney, Boone goes, and there's a standoff almost, sort of thing.
Yeah, so yeah, the flashback arc is that Boone is at the country club. He gets a frantic call from Shannon. It sounds like she's in a bad way, so he instantly hops on a plane to Sydney to go and rescue her from what sounds like an abusive boyfriend. And then he tracks down the boyfriend and he offers him money to leave Shannon alone. But then it transpires that Shannon has faked the argument and the abuse, and it's a way to swindle him out of money. And there's something mentioned about how their parents, when Shannon's dad died, Boone's mother got all the money and she didn't give any to Shannon, because Boone and Shannon are step siblings. So it's kind of like she's been pulling this con on him like repeatedly, trying to like get him to like pay boyfriends off so that she can get access to her father's money. And then it turns on her, and this guy then leaves her high and dry. And then she rocks up at Boone's hotel room, where she tells him that she knows that he's always been in love with her. They sleep together, and then the next morning she's just like dropped him completely. She's moved on from that. So it's kind of, it doesn't show Shannon in the best light. She's very manipulative, and there is this scene early on where Boone goes up to Saeed and is like, you leave my sister alone. And I think initially the reading of that is, she's mine, stay away from my sister. But I actually kind of think it's Boone warning Saeed away because of how Shannon has played with him. He doesn't want to see that happen to somebody else. So there is some interesting dynamic to the flashback, but I guess, I mean, anybody that's seen Cruel Intentions, we've seen step siblings, going after each other before. It's nothing new. I think it was meant to be shocking. But again, at the time, I remember thinking this isn't anything. I think the only really interesting thing about this flashback is Boone goes to visit a police department, which I don't quite know how it all works, but he's in Australia and he's talking to a British police officer, which just confused me because I don't quite get the logistics of that. But in the background, we see a Sawyer walk past, and this is kind of the first in what, as Lost goes forwards, will become many of these interactions between these people before they boarded that plane. So that's quite sort of exciting to go, wait a minute, was that Sawyer?
Yeah. It's interesting the way you read the Boone and Saeed sort of standoff at the start. I took it as him acting like a jealous boyfriend. It's interesting. You can read it different ways. And I mean, threatening Saeed, like Locke is basically says to him, really? You're the, as we've described him, the kind of happy-go-lucky, try everything puppy dog. That man nearly killed one of the most dangerous people on this island, and you want to try and piss him off? I wouldn't. Basically, is essentially what Locke says to him. And yeah, if it's like faux bravado that's maybe been brought on by being sort of mummy's little darling, maybe. Because when in the police station before we see, or during the whole scene where we see Sawyer as well, he's like, maybe you'll know my mum. She owns a wedding company in the US. It's like, why would someone in Sydney know or care about that? And the guy just totally blows him off. Has no interest in it whatsoever. It's like do you know who I am? Even though I'm not a celebrity, this doesn't really work. Doesn't really fly. The Shannon aspect, she does not come across well, and it shows a manipulative nature which we had saw before briefly, kind of early on with Charlie, where Boone tells her to catch a fish, and instead of doing it herself, she get Charlie to do it for her. So we've seen it on a more kind of throwaway scale, but more light-hearted scale with the Charlie thing. But this is showing that maybe she is. I mean, Boone does mention that she is clever, she is smart, but she just doesn't show it. And yeah, it's an interesting dynamic with them. But yeah, it's a strange couple of episodes to bang together when you've been away for a month.
I do enjoy how it kind of goes from Boone sort of threatening Saeed immediately to the conversation with John Locke, where it's like, but we need Saeed. Like Saeed's like, 'cause obviously, as you sort of said, this is kind of like a Locke episode by stealth sort of thing of him sort of like building up. And we've mentioned before how he kind of feels like a cult leader, and it's like he's already got it sounds like in that conversation he's got Saeed sort of on his list of potentials that he wants to do, and if Boone messes with him, then he's not going to get him. And then we get into this whole jigsaw trap, the early noughties gave us John Kramer, and it also gave us John Locke. I'm not really sure whose jigsaw puzzle, I would rather rather be in, because Boone's is pretty extreme. So obviously Boone's like, I want to tell Shannon, and John's like, really? Are you sure? Really? And then he whacks him over the head. And prior to that, he's been like making some concoction, and Boone's like, what are you making, John? And he's like, oh, this is for later. So he was already got the inkling what he's going to do. And then he bats Boone around the head, rubs some nice hallucinogenics into it, and then ties one like with his hand behind his back, and in order to like free himself, he's got to like strain forwards and risk breaking his arm. And that's a very convoluted trap from John Locke, I feel.
Yeah, I think he says to him, put it down, you'll be able to cut yourself free once you have the proper motivation. So it is, again, Locke's trying to find his own sort of ragtag group, almost, ones that he can trust, ones that he knows will go to any sort of lengths, either to survive or to help him, or to be a benefit towards Locke and what he's got planned, whatever that may be. It was an interesting twist on it, where when Boone does eventually break out, because he hears Shannon screaming, and then he hears the roar from the woods again. That, because I hadn't remembered that, I thought that what Locke was putting on his head actually was to help him to stop any sort of infection that after they hit him over the head with the baton. It turns out it was a hallucinogenic. So Boone is basically thinking he's saving Shannon, and she's nagging him, and she's saying, why are you doing this? Who's Locke to you? Why are you always out with him? It's weird. And eventually she succumbs to something, pulls her up into the air. And this is where I've got a kind of Mandela effect with it, because I thought this was the episode where something else happened, which I won't go into. But to stop myself there before I did. And it's when it's revealed that that's actually just been a hallucinogen, and Locke. Now, I was unsure with this. Is it a hallucinogenic that is obviously affected Boone to a point where he is seeing Shannon and he's hearing something, and that's all it is? Or is it also manipulation from the island as well as that? Because it does seem very visceral and very full on. He says, Shannon died in my arms, and you see her bleeding out in a river, and she's got her chest ripped open and all sorts going on. I wasn't too sure if it was a bit of both, maybe.
Yeah, well, I mean, John's told us many times before, the island will show you what you need to see. And I guess that's what Boone needs to see to kind of sever that tie to Shannon. Is that, yeah, the island and John Locke have sent him on kind of like a vision quest. And obviously like Boone's kind of aligned with Locke to, try and be seen as, as important, and I guess, as a man almost. And that's obviously in a lot of cultures. You go on these like spirit walks and stuff to go from being a boy to a man. So I guess this is kind of
Mhm.
the island's version of that, with Boone going through this transition. And then yeah, by the end of the episode, he seems, entirely, a disciple of John Locke. And again, I kind of feel that there's some sort of like thesis essay somewhere on the comparisons of John Locke and John Kramer after this episode, because we've
Yeah.
kind of got now in Boone, we have got, we've got an Amanda, we've got a Shawnee Smith sort of character who is now gonna,
Mm.
do whatever, Locke says, which is quite interesting.
Mm. And it's interesting as well with Locke because he's still very prominent out with that sort of set piece because he's meets Said and he's helpful towards Said, gives him a compass. He's having a discussion with Jack about the boar are maybe moving out with the valley because the greatest hunters entered their sort of territory. It was so he's very much at the forefront of the background, if that's the right sort of phrase to use. It also made me wonder. We obviously had an earlier episode with Jack hallucinating seeing his dad, and Locke was saying that's part of the island. That's the island showing you something, or I can't remember the exact ins and outs of it. But Jack had to go on his journey. Has Locke done this to other people before? Has he poisoned Jack at an earlier stage that we are not aware of? Possibly, he could be already have found his bearings in there and could have already been kind of asserting his influence over probably the strongest person of the group or the figurehead of the group to see how he can manipulate him as well. Lots of games going on, as you said, from a John in the noughties.
Yeah, there is a lot of conversation about him, because obviously it starts with, this conversation of, the ball. They're not bringing back ball. They're disappearing, but there's no ball. And then, Jack and Kate have this conversation, and Kate's like, well, why would he? Like, if the ball is dwindling, why would he feed the rest of us? Which again, I think is telling of Kate's own sort of agenda, where she kind of just is focused on herself.
Yeah,
And then, Jack's asking Charlie, what do you think of John Locke? And Charlie is quite open. He basically says that his first impression that he was somebody that would have gone postal,
yeah,
on his employers, which is not the best thing. But then he admits that, but then John Locke saved me. So this is, the whole thing with him being the first to help him get off of the drugs. So there
yeah,
is, Charlie has the potential to, because he even says, if there's anybody I trust to get us off this island, it is John Locke.
yeah.
So he's definitely gaining power and influencing people, without necessarily doing a lot. Jack is always at the forefront. Jack's always doing this, that, and the other. But Locke is in the background, but people have noticed him and are drawn to him.
Yeah, yeah, and it's been that sort of back and forth between him and Jack since the beginning. They have a way of. I mean, I think Locke is leading, but he has his own way where he sees people as being capable in their own way if they get the right, as you said, to Boone, the right motivation. Same way he's done with Charlie, same way even done with Jack. If they get pushed the right way, whether it is violent and aggressive the way he's done with Boone, or whether it's a kind of gentle prod the way he's done with Jack, they can help themselves. Whereas Jack is very much, I will, everyone else is possibly weaker than me, I'll help them. I'll be the one that carries the burden of survivors, of being the only medical doctor on the island, of anything like that he sees as a challenge. He doesn't think that anyone else can do, possibly. So is that good or bad what Jack's doing, or is what Locke's doing better for them because he knows that they have to have a will to survive to be able to, if they're going to make it off the island ever, or if they're going to have to go up against much more challenging times, and especially after what's happened to Claire as well, as you've said, he'll know Ethan. He knows what that guy is capable of to an extent, having seemingly been the one that had spent most time with him. So is he preparing them for something further down the road with Ethan?
Something that sort of I've gone back and forth on is there's the interaction with Locke and Saeed where he gives him a compass, and then we see Saeed talking to Jack saying like, oh, where's north, and he's like, this compass is broken. And it's interesting that it instantly went with this compass is broken and not this is another one of the island's mysteries where its magnetic force is interfering with the compass and throwing it off. And it's a case of, is it the island or is it a faulty compass? But obviously John Locke's been using that, and it's like, is this maybe an indication that John Locke's belief isn't the healthiest thing, that he maybe is steering people down the wrong path?
And he does say to Saeed, I won't need this anymore, doesn't he? Because Saeed says to him, you'll need this, do you not? And he says, no, not anymore. So is that because the compass is just broken and he's just winding side up? I don't think Locke's the type to do that, certainly. Not petulant or any or petty. But it kind of delves further into what he feels is his connection with the island. And if he reads it wrong, his connection with the island could be, if the island's as powerful, and it's clearly powerful, it's literally made a man in a wheelchair find his legs again. If it is as powerful as Locke thinks it is he then underestimating it as well? And as you said, leading them all down the wrong path, leading them to a destruction or a confrontation that they're not going to be able to face up against, even though he might have more belief in certain people.
Yeah, it was just like, I don't know, when I've seen this one a couple of times, and it's like, I don't quite know where that's going. But I guess outside of John and Boone and Shannon and stuff, we also have Sun is making a garden. She's planting seeds. She's making a grove. She's got a little garden. She's also doing a grove. And Kate is collecting seeds. I'm a little confused as to why it seems to be like a secret project, because surely there's like 40 odd of them still left. Surely 40 odd people planting all their seeds would be better than just two. But then we do get this reveal to Kate that Sun knows English. Obviously she's already told Michael that she can speak English, but she kind of gives herself away to Kate. So that's another person that knows. But whereas like Michael was confused by it, Kate kind of instantly understands why Sun wants to keep it a secret, which again I think is very telling about who Kate is as a person.
Yeah, she has her own secrets, and Sun says, you can't tell Jin because I love him. And maybe that touches on Kate in the last episode as well, because before she admits that it's the small model plane she has was owned by the man she killed, she was saying, oh, it was owned by the man I loved. And maybe that's true as well, because we don't know Kate's thinking. Maybe it was the man she loved, the man she killed are one and the same, if there is a link at all. So she has that basic understanding. She seemed to fairly get over her trauma at the end of that last episode fairly quickly, but I suppose in a situation like this you do have to move on. It also maybe speaks to a bit more of acceptance by people on the island that they're going to be there for a while. Because if you're planting seeds to grow fruit, which seems to be plentiful. I mean, Hurley has his trouble in bowel motions in this, which he wants to discuss with Jack because he's eating so much fruit and no protein because he won't eat fish. They've obviously accepted that they're going to be there for a while if planting seeds. I can't imagine no matter how optimum the weather conditions are for tropical fruit. It's not going to be a quick process.
No.
So it's a kind of a small wee nugget of there of how they're feeling. And yeah, the Jin and Hurley romance is maybe a bit too soon with it, but there's a sort of it's certainly the most comedic element of the episode.
Yeah.
Again, having Hurley in it, where he basically feels that he's offended Jin by not eating the sea urchin earlier on in the series, and feels he has to sort of try and fend for himself and fail dramatically at it.
Yeah, there's some really nice scenes because obviously you've got in Boone's, spirit quest, it's quite, intense. And so, Shannon is like seen butchered. And then we need a bit of levity, a bit of lightness, and you've got these lovely scenes between Jin and Hurley where obviously they can't communicate with one another, but Hurley wants help fishing, and then he seems to think that Jin is slighting him, so he's like, "Fine, I'll do it myself then." And then he gets into trouble and he steps on an urchin, and he's trying to get sort of like Jin to help him, and it's a lovely sort of like thing because I have been very anti Jin up until this point, but now we're getting to maybe see a little bit of he's interacting with a character that's not his wife, and he's not just telling her to shut up and put some clothes on. So it's quite, and I think whoever you place with Hurley, I think the audience are going to warm to, because I think the audience kind of trust Hurley's judge of character almost. So the fact that Hurley is spending time with Jin for whatever the reason, it's like, okay, no, maybe we did kind of, and Jin does help him, and then at the end he does bring him a fish, and it's been cleaned and everything. So he's not completely heartless.
Yeah, there is a softening to him, and it is it does end on a more hopeful note when Michael finds his own bag as well and says he'll be able to finally
Yes.
use his own toothbrush, which I can only imagine what they've been doing. I suppose Jin had been providing, not Jin, sorry, Sun had been providing them with, was it aloe or something? An aloe plant that she was telling people to clean their teeth with. So hopefully they've been using that and not each other's toothbrushes, because that would be grim. But yeah, and the Hurley interaction after he's jagged his foot as well, where he's desperately trying to get Jin to pee on his foot, which he understood that because Hurley just kept pointing at his crotch and then pointing at his foot. So, and he understood the word no. So we got to that point with their relationship, that Jin is not willing to pee on anyone. So that's good to know moving forward. But yeah, it's sort of semi hopeful ending. There's uplifting music playing and people seem a bit more content. And again, it's maybe that whole thing with the garden. There's an acceptance now. We're going to be here. We need to try and make the most of it. And Jin's softening. Sun's now actually able to develop more relationships now because she's got it's accidentally discovered by Kate, but it gives her another outlet because she's not exactly speaking to Michael much. And I think Jin would also be less aggressive, possibly, if she's conversing or she's keeping company with another woman.
Yeah, exactly. Although it did, Kate was obviously like so amazed that Sun knows English and stuff. But I'm pretty sure like a couple of episodes ago, because obviously Sun has taken on this kind of role as nurse to Jack's doctor. She's always seems to be around like the wounded and stuff, and she's like doing relations measures. I'm pretty sure like a few episodes ago there was a conversation between Jack and Kate about Kate being a criminal that Sun was in the cave for. Obviously, they had the conversation because our Korean lady, she doesn't know what we're talking about. I'm just surprised that Kate didn't twig that, oh, wait a minute, then she now knows my secret. Or maybe she has, but she's not reacting, and that's why she is like, oh, yeah, no, I'll keep your secret. It's like, I keep your secret, you keep mine, sort of thing.
Yeah, I never even thought of that as well. And would that have been before? It could just... It could be something that gets addressed later on, I'm not sure. Or is it just a kind of writer's misstep, possibly, that they've... But again, they don't seem to make mistakes. It could be...
Yeah.
Is it maybe is it been before soon you realise soon could speak English in front of Michael. I can't remember. Possibly because I think that actually happens quite early on, a lot earlier than we expected.
Yeah.
So it probably has happened after that. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see if that does get brought back up, because they then have a sort of equal amount of power over each other and will want to probably keep each other close to make sure there's no rumours spreading or no little tidbits getting released to other people.
Yeah, I guess I think there probably is a little bit more going on in this one than we gave it credit for. I just think it's a lot of little bits. There's a lot of little bits going on. I think sort of almost everybody gets a little moment. I mean, Charlie's taking his aspirin to withdraw from heroin, which is
Don't know how effective that would
uh,
be.
but yeah, it's there's all these sort of like little bits and pieces sort of going on. So I kind of feel like if we'd have gone from the end of All the Best Cowboys Have Daddy Issues into this one, I wouldn't have missed the one in the middle. I kind of feel that
No.
this one would have been a better comeback because there is the monster. I mean,
Yeah.
it turns out to be a trick. It's kind of it's revealed to have not been real, but it does have that.
Yeah.
Oh, the thing's back. So I kind of feel that would have probably been a better one to come back on. It would have like come back strong. But I
Yeah.
mean, I think the whole first season of Lost was so universally well received that they can be forgiven the odd little sort of filler misstep.
Yeah. That little hiccup in it. I'm just looking forward as well, and it is that was the lowest. That's the lowest rated of the series as well. So it's all up from here, ups and downs. I'm assuming, but it certainly it doesn't go as throwaway as. God, I forgot the name of the episode. What's in the case or something? Whatever the case may be, that's what it is. Not Seven sequel. Yeah, it definitely feels like they had went in this, because you said there's the Boone and Locke thing, which is where we last left it. We've nothing but that extra with the hatch the past 2 episodes though as well. So the focus seems to have moved away from that again. And is that again a distraction? Because it's there, and that only 2 people know about it, but there's so much else going on that you kind of forget and move away from it. That sort of misdirection that they've managed to instill just 2 episodes in. They have a discussion about the hatch. What if am I jumping ahead on an episode? Possibly, so I won't.
They talk, and like John
They,
gives this big speech about Michelangelo and
yeah.
how like Michelangelo once stared, a piece of clay for so many months, and then it became the statue of David. And so their plan at this point in time to get into this hatch, which seems to be like all like cemented and concreted in, is to sit and stare at it. Which I
Yeah.
guess again ties back to John's belief in the island. I guess John knows that, or believes that, the island will show him the way. The hatch will open itself when the island deems it so, and until then he's just happy to wait for it to open.
Yeah. It's see how we go with that hatch, but yeah, it was okay. But I think there's definitely more to come moving forward.
Yeah. And I guess that's a sort of a nice place to end. So before we share, what we have got coming up in the next episodes, where can people find yourself on social media, Andy?
So you can find me on Blue Sky and Twitter at Nowhere Andy. That's pretty much my main ones just now. I've got Instagram and things, but I'm inactive. I wouldn't even say limited activity.
I am at Gizmo Shikari on Letterboxd and Instagram, and I'm just cathughes.bsky.social on Blue Sky, because I am slowly transitioning away from Twitter as everybody leaves and my follow account depletes. I stay more in the Blue Sky. It's slightly nicer. But yes, so that was this week's episode on Whatever the Case May Be and Hearts and Minds. slightly fillery, but next time I think we're starting to ramp back up a little bit. What episodes are on the next time, Andy?
So up next is episodes 14 and 15, Special and Homecoming. Special looking a wee bit more at Walt and Michael, and Homecoming looking again into Charlie, finding more out about Charlie. So join us next time for that.
Yeah. See you next time, guys.